Chapter 6 of The Shokan by Frederick Chambliss Wemyss. In the summers of 1962, 1963, and 1964, my parents rented a nice old house in Shokan, New York, near, but I believe not quite in, the Catskill Mountains. The rest of the year we lived in an apartment in New York City. I'm the youngest of 3 children, all brothers. In 1962, I was 2, my brother Bob was 4, and our brother Frank was 6. I am 45 years old now. This was written in 2005. In 1962, my father was 39 and my mother was 35. My father was drafted into the Army during World War II. He served and remained stationed in Europe until about a year after the war ended. His time in the Army interrupted his time in college. When he went back home, he went back to college. By the time he and my mother met, he was in graduate school and she was in college. They married in 1951, 3 years after they met. Frank wasn't born until November of '55, so while he and my brothers, being children of World War II generation parents, can be called baby boomers, many of the landmarks associated with the lives of the baby boomer generation don't apply to us. Elvis Presley hit the scene before Frank was born. Frank probably doesn't have much of a memory of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and certainly Lucy and Ricky's baby was born without Frank noticing. We didn't have a TV until 1965. We didn't even have one when Kennedy was shot. That was earlier anyway. When I was in elementary school on Long Island, the parents of the other children seemed younger than mine, although when I think of it, all my friends had a father who'd been in the Second World War. The meaner kids seemed to have parents who'd grown up at the drive-in. I didn't get along with kids whose parents were 10 years younger than mine. Those were the kids with the Mattel toys and Stingrays. After we moved to Long Island, which was in 1965, summer would approach and I'd say to my father, "Can we go to the Shokan?" He'd say no, as if he hadn't liked the place. Then my mother would add, "We have the house here." I hated Long Island. Well into my 30s, a friend of my parents asked me if I remembered a Shokan. I remembered it vividly, I said. I told her I'd always wished we'd gone back after 1964. She said, "Well, you couldn't." She and I were smoking a cigarette. It was a party for another friend of my parents. We hadn't seen most of the people there in years. She was delighted to see me smoking on the porch and had come outside. She took a drag of her particular cigarette and said, "The landlord told your father the partying was too much." "What?" "He wouldn't rent to him again." So my father liked the Shokan after all.